In 410 AD, the mighty Roman Empire pulled its legions out of Britain, leaving the island vulnerable and defenseless. What followed was a wave of fierce invasions by Germanic tribes, Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, who would forever change the landscape of Britain. Legendary battles were fought and new kingdoms rose from the ashes of the old Roman province. But how did these invaders transform a land once ruled by emperors into what is now known as England? In 410 AD, the Roman Empire, still struggling with internal collapse and external threats, made the critical decision to withdraw its legions from Britain. After nearly 4 centuries of Roman rule, the island was suddenly left to fend for itself. Now, this was a significant moment in history because without the protective shield of Roman military power, Britain was left vulnerable to various external threats, including raiders and invaders. The Britons, who had grown accustomed to Roman governance, laws, and comforts, were now on their own. As the Roman infrastructure collapsed, life in Britain began to change dramatically. Roman cities, once bustling with trade and wealth, began to decay. Villas that once stood as symbols of Roman luxury were abandoned as the Britons retreated to more rural areas. The urban lifestyle that had defined Roman Britain had started to fade away, and many Britons returned to their Celtic roots, seeking refuge in old hill forts and rural communities that had long been abandoned during Roman rule. The once orderly and connected province became patchwork of scattered settlements, with little of the former Roman splendor still remaining. This period, known as the sub-Roman Britain, was marked by a unique blend of Roman and Celtic traditions. Even though the Romans had left, their influence lingered in certain areas. Roman customs and traditions had persisted, especially among the Romano-Britons who had grown used to the Roman ways of life. In some places, Roman language, art, and architecture remained visible for a time, although they were slowly being overtaken by the resurgence of Celtic traditions. Traders from distant lands like Byzantium and North Africa still made the journey to Britain, primarily attracted by the island's valuable tin deposits. Now, these traders offered a lifeline to some of the remaining Romano Britons, allowing them to maintain a pale imitation of the Roman lifestyles through imported goods. However, as the years passed, the trade dwindled, and the once thriving province of Britannia became an isolated and fragmented land. As Britain found itself vulnerable and struggling in the aftermath of Roman withdrawal, a new force began to emerge: the Anglo-Saxons. Now, these were a group of Germanic tribes that hailed from the regions in North Germany and Scandinavia. The Anglo-Saxons and Jutes were among the most prominent of these tribes. They were known for their warrior culture, their pagan beliefs, and their desire for new lands to settle. It was during this time that the tribes began to set their sights on Britain. According to legend, the Romano-British king, Vortigern, played a significant role in the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons. Desperate for help against the constant raids from the Picts and the Scots, Vortigern invited the Anglo-Saxons to assist in defending the kingdom. 2 brothers, Hengist and Horsa, led the Anglo-Saxon forces in this effort. At first, their assistance was invaluable. They successfully helped Vortigern fend off the raiders, offering a much-needed reprieve from the Britons. Now, this alliance didn't last very long, though. After helping the Britons, the Anglo-Saxons turned against their former allies. Instead of returning home, they decided to claim part of Britain for themselves. Hengist and Horsa established control over the region that would later become the Kingdom of Kent. This betrayal marked the beginning of a much larger wave of Anglo-Saxon invasions and migrations that would reshape the future of Britain. In the chaotic period following the Roman withdrawal, Britain wasn't simply handed over to the Anglo-Saxons. The native Britons, though fragmented and weakened, put up a fierce resistance. The era gave rise to legendary figures, both historical and mythical, who fought to protect the land from invasion. It was a time of great struggle and heroism, where the Britons did everything in their power to fend off the Anglo-Saxon threat. Among the heroic efforts, the figure of King Arthur stands out as one of the most iconic. Now, Arthur is said to have led the Britons to a series of victories, particularly at the famous Battle of Badon Hill. Though historians debate whether Arthur was a real person or purely a legend, his story became a powerful symbol of resistance. According to the tales, Arthur rallied warriors from across Britain, defeating the Anglo-Saxon forces and giving the Britons a temporary reprieve from invasion. His name has become synonymous with the fight for Britain's survival during this turbulent time. However, while Arthur's existence may be shrouded in myth, another figure, Ambrosius Aurelianus, likely played a significant role in the resistance. Ambrosius, a Romanized Briton, is believed to have been a key military leader who organized the defense of Britain during the Anglo-Saxon invasions. He's often credited with helping to secure the crucial victory at Badon, delaying the Anglo-Saxon advance. Unlike Arthur, Ambrosius was almost certainly a historical figure, and his efforts were vital in holding back the tide of invaders for quite some time. Despite these victories, the successes of Arthur and Ambrosius only provided a temporary halt to the Anglo-Saxon advance. The Britons won some crucial battles, but the Anglo-Saxons were not stopped for good. They regrouped and continued their conquests, slowly but steadily pushing further into Britain. While the Britons fought valiantly, their resistance could only delay the inevitable, as the Anglo-Saxon presence in Britain grew stronger with every passing year. By the 6th century, the Anglo-Saxons had solidified their control over much of southern and eastern Britain. Now, this land, once dominated by Roman influence, was now carved into new Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria became key centers of power, with the Anglo-Saxon rulers establishing their own systems of governance and culture. Now, these kingdoms weren't just temporary conquests, though. They became permanent fixtures in the landscape of Britain, marking the beginning of what would later evolve into the Kingdom of England. As these new kingdoms emerged, many Britons faced a very difficult choice. Some fled westward to regions like Wales and Cornwall, where they could maintain their Celtic traditions and avoid assimilation into the Anglo-Saxon way of life. Others, however, stayed behind and slowly began to integrate into Anglo-Saxon society. This culture blending wasn't just a one-way street, though. While Anglo-Saxons imposed their own language and customs, they also adopted many elements of the Celtic culture that they encountered. The Anglo-Saxon kings, for example, were known to take on Celtic influences in their rule, and the artistic traditions of the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons began to merge. This blend of cultures created a new and unique identity in Britain. The Anglo-Saxons, once seen as foreign invaders, became permanent residents of the land. Over generations, the distinction between Anglo-Saxon and Britain blurred a bit, with people from both backgrounds contributing to the development of a new society. This transformation marked the transition from a Romanized province to a land deeply influenced by Germanic tribes, shaping the future of the island. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxon invasion is still visible in modern England. One of the most profound impacts was on the language. The Anglo-Saxon language, often known as Old English, became the dominant tongue in the regions that they controlled. Over time, this language would evolve, influencing the development of the English that we speak today. Many common English words and phrases have their roots in this early Anglo-Saxon language, making it a foundational part of English culture. Place names around England also bear the mark of the Anglo-Saxon presence. Regions like Sussex and Essex are clear reminders of the tribes that controlled the areas. These names have persisted for centuries, serving as a constant reminder of the Anglo-Saxon influence on the country's geography and identity. Politically, the Anglo-Saxon invasion laid the groundwork for what eventually would become the unified Kingdom of England. Their systems of governance, law, and social structure became the foundation for future English rule. The creation of early kingdoms like Wessex and Mercia was the beginning of a long process that would eventually lead to the unification of England under a single monarch. The Anglo-Saxons introduced a sense of order and stability that would help shape the future of the country. Celtic traditions, art, and even some aspects of their governance persisted in the regions where the Britons remained strong, such as in Wales and Cornwall. The Anglo-Saxon culture that emerged was not purely Germanic, but rather a blend of the native Celtic heritage and the new Anglo-Saxon influence. This blending of cultures helped create a rich and diverse society, one that reflected both the old and the new. So let me know, what are your thoughts on this? Be sure to let us know in the comments below.